Okay, so we're back with Ken and Mike. I just want to say a couple things about last podcast when we showed that photograph. I guess we got people talking because it became very popular. It was very, very popular, and we've gotten a lot of comments about it.
Yeah.
Um, we are, as we speak, we have someone analyzing that photograph, and hopefully next week we'll have some answers for you. But in the meantime, Ken was able to track down another inmate who's still alive who spent time at Alcatraz, which I find fascinating that these people that are still alive after all this time, after, it's just amazing that there's still people alive from that era who actually spent time on that island. So Ken, tell us who you ended up tracking down, and I believe that they do have some connection or know about your uncles and the people on Alcatraz. Can give us a headline here.
Well, I can't actually take credit for finding him. That was all Mike's work. Mike tracked him down and then forwarded or got in contact with me and said, "Hey, you might want to think about calling this guy." And with my connection with Alcatraz, he just felt like I was the one to kind of reach out and make contact with him. And I'm actually glad I did. He's a very interesting character. I will say that. He spent almost an hour with me on the phone yesterday, and he said, ask away any question you want to ask. I'll be happy to answer it. He was very truthful, at least I believe he was. And it was good to kind of get his take on what he thought about Alcatraz, what he thought about the escape, what he thought about my uncles. And so I plan on playing it here and just let you listen to the interview.
Okay, cool. And Mike, how did you track him down? Nice job, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. I can't take full credit for it. It was actually, there's another person that we're trying to get on the show who some years ago interviewed a number of Alcatraz inmates, most of whom have passed away since then. And he's written a book about it. He's done a couple little small documentaries about his interviews. And one of the people that he mentioned specifically was Charlie Hopkins. And through this other person that I'm still hoping we get on the show, because he'd have a lot of great stories to tell about Alcatraz because of his book, I should say. He mentions Charlie Hopkins and that he was still alive. And through him, I was trying to get connected to him. But this other person is very hard to get a hold of. He's very busy, sending emails, phone calls, that kind of thing. And so I thought, I don't know how long this is going to take. And this Charlie Hopkins is either 92 or 93. And, we don't want to wait too much longer because anything could happen. And so I thought, well, maybe I can try to find him, just do an internet search, and started digging and looking, and finally tracked him down to Florida. And there were several phone numbers and an address that I, sent to Ken. I said, "Hey, Ken, I think one of these numbers might be a good number for him. So why don't you give it a try?" And fortunately, it was the first number there on the list. He called him. He says, "Yeah, it was the first one. I got a hold of him, and I'm gonna talk to him the next day and record the call." Mm-hmm. And so we worked on some questions. So we wanted to ask things that we didn't forget about later, like, "Oh, I wish I'd asked him that and I forgot." So we tried to be as prepared as possible, and it worked out. And now we have this really interesting interview we get to hear.
Fantastic. And now, just to be clear, to clarify that was he there when John and Clarence was there, or was he there before then? Or
no, he was there before. It would have been nice if he was there, for the escape. But he was there from 55 to 58, and that was even before Frank Morris and Whitey Bulger showed up. So at Alcatraz, he didn't know the primary people, but he did know them. He knew the brothers before. And also, like Ken, he did get to know Whitey Bulger, not through Alcatraz, but when he was, later incarcerated in 2015, just when Ken started connecting with him, so did Charlie Hopkins through Don DeNevy, who wrote a book about Ken has talked about Don DeNevy before, writing a book.
Riddle of the Rock.
Right, Riddle of the Rock. So he connected with Charlie Hopkins as well. And through Don DeNevy, he said, "Hey, you should write Mickey Cohen because I'm sorry, not Mickey Cohen, Whitey Bulger, and because you obviously have Alcatraz in common, you've lived similar lives, and so I think you'd be a good." And they became friends, through letters. And he has quite a number of letters of kind of sharing their stories. And Ken said he's going to talk to Charlie Hopkins again tomorrow.
Mhm.
And one of the things that Charlie Hopkins offered was copies of the letters. And so Ken's going to try to get that set up so we can get more information from Whitey Bulger, which would be amazing.
Yeah. And then Ken, right before we start playing the recording, what was he in Alcatraz for?
He never really kind of said how he ended up in Alcatraz. He definitely was in prison for robbing. He was a thief. Criminal, and all he said was when I asked him the question about how he wound up in Alcatraz, he just said he was always in trouble. I think he was always in fights, because he does talk a lot about fighting. And at some point in time, they just said, "Okay, you're a troublemaker," and they sent him to Alcatraz. So but he never really kind of said exactly what he did.
Well, it was obvious a federal crime.
Yes.
Yeah, he was basically a lifelong criminal, kind of like with Frank Morris. Started off in very young. Just I saw a 20-minute interview that this other person had done of him, and just was kind of a bad kid. He didn't really feel like, hey, if it's mine, it's mine, and I don't care that I'm taking it from you. He just kind of had that
what he just said.
That moral bent. And he grew up in the Depression, grew up poor, grew up hungry. And so he just took what he wanted because it would, it was for his benefit. And he went to jail, and, he just kind of escalate over the years, and you just get, the crimes get worse and worse. And then, like you said, it eventually becomes a federal crime because he went to the same places that the brothers did. The only time they ever really crossed paths was at Marianna boys school. But he also went to Florida State Prison. He went to
Rayford.
Rayford. He went to Leavenworth, and he went to Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, and then, of course, Alcatraz. So we were hoping that they were there at the same time, but they weren't. They just sort of were at the same places, but didn't cross paths most of the time. So he just kind of worked his way up to the major stuff, but it was just basically theft was his bent.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, anything else you want to talk about before we start playing? And then we'll stop when we, Ken, when you feel like it. Well, I'll put my hand up, or Cindy will put her hand if we want to comment about. We have a question about something.
Okay, yeah, because you can tell when I ask him a question, and I let him answer it for as long as he wanted to speak. So I can stop it at each of the questions and just see if you want to talk about them. So
okay, cool.
So I'm gonna hold it up close to my microphone so everyone can hear very good.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So Charlie, why don't you start off and tell me a little bit about yourself, about like where you grew up at and how or what started. How did you get into a life of crime?
I was born in Jacksonville, Florida. But the time I was in the first grade, I was stealing. I don't know. It was just something I did, and I got a thrill out of doing it.
Right.
I remember the school teacher. This is during World War II now when it first started. And they did bombing drills in case we got bombed. We didn't know how to get out of the classroom and where we went,
right,
safety. Well, when they had them drills like that, I would steal money off the other kids' desk, and it didn't bother me at all for some reason, Now I can see, that ain't right. But I did that kind of stuff growing up. I remember the teacher in the first grade. She told her whole I seem to have a talent for stealing,
I understand.
So that was my first question about, how he kind of wound up there. But as Mike said, you can see that he started off in first grade stealing. So it was, he is actually pretty close to John and Clarence and Alfred's story. I mean, they started off at a very young age of stealing stuff, small stuff, and eventually just kind of worked their way up to something larger.
Yeah, that's interesting. So he grew up in Florida?
Undoubtedly so. He was born in Jacksonville, and he's still living just below Jacksonville. Yeah, he's from Florida.
Wow, there's so many similarities.
Yeah.
It is. It's kind of amazing. I mean, he grew up poor, and he just wanted more out of life than what life was giving him at that time. So.
Yeah, the only thing different is that he wasn't an escape artist.
Okay, let me continue on.
But my grandmother told me was my father was a guy named Ridgway, Carl Ridgway.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he was a bad guy. So I guess I got all that from him. Because the Hopkins guy that was supposed to be my daddy, he was religious. He went to church every Sunday.
Right.
He was a nice guy.
So you didn't follow in his footsteps.
No, it wasn't nothing like him.
So think back and tell me when the first time you ever met John and Clarence, and I'm assuming you met Alfred too, but when was the first time you met them?
Oh, John and Clarence is on too. I knew we was in the form school at the same time. Me and Clarence was in number 1 cottage, and John was in number 3.
I got you.
He was in there with little bigger boys and older boys. So they went by your age and your size and all.
What was your impression of them? What did you think about them?
They was quiet. They never got in any trouble that I know of in Marianna. I got the hell beat out of me twice. A big boat oar with a sawed off arm on it. Mm-hmm. Just like a boat oar, and it had a short handle on it, and that's what you lift you with.
Ooh.
That special building that they did it in, they would make you bend over a chair. The chair was at the foot of the bed, a little wide, like an army bunk. Mm-hmm. And, that's where they whipped with the board. And if you couldn't hold, they made you bend over and hold the bottom of the chair. And if you couldn't do that, they made you lay down on the bed and you was held down and beat that way.
Oh my goodness.
Here, stop for a second. Stop for a second.
Yes.
So he was just talking about the reform school in Marietta. Is that what he said?
That's correct.
And then because just getting bits and pieces there, it's, obviously it's a little bit more, his voice is like aged and it's hard to hear, but he was talking about how these guys are quiet, which is kind of par for the course. Everybody said that they were quiet and they didn't get in trouble while they were incarcerated.
No.
They just kind of did what they were told there until they escaped there. So it was part of their MO, keep a low profile and then bust out. And then, but he was talking about how they would get reprimanded and say whipped with a bullwhip.
Well, he said that they had something like a paddle, a boat paddle, but it was shorter, so it was more. He called it a board, an oar. And I mean, that's I don't know how many people grew up in the kind of schools that I grew up in, and that was pretty standard in a school. But it sounded like that this boys' school took it even a little bit further. They were very strict with them. And at some point in time, I do talk to him about the boxing that they allowed the boys to get into to resolve conflicts, and he does talk about that. So he gives a pretty surprising answer to it eventually. But I saw y'all's faces when he mentioned his somebody he was related to? Did that name ring a bell to you?
Well, it's a trigger name for us. 'Cause
Yeah.
he said it was related to a Ridgway, last name
Right.
Ridgway.
Right.
Well, the name comes up because we did a documentary on a serial killer called Gary Ridgway, who was the Green River Killer. So I'm like, I thought it was
And now
interesting.
he said his uncle or his father was pretty bad person too. So.
Yeah, not that there's any connection or anything, but the name stood out
I
to
mean,
us.
I don't think there is. I mean, he was in Seattle.
But this is a long time ago, so you never know. But anyway, so it kind of stuck out. It's kind of an infamous last name.
Right. Okay, I'm going to continue on.
Doing that kind of stuff.
I'm telling you.
I did it back then.
Well, when you were there with them at Marianna, did they ever try to plan to escape from there? Did you ever know if they ever tried to escape when they were there?
No, they never got in any trouble at all that I know of.
Okay.
No, they behaved themselves.
Was prison the only time you ever were around them? Were you ever around them outside of prison?
No, not outside, no.
Okay.
No, I lived in Jacksonville, and they lived way down south.
Yeah, they live down in Ruskin, Florida.
Yeah, I never run into them.
Did you ever spend time in other prisons with them?
No.
No, just the Marianna.
I went to Rayford in 1950,
Okay.
and they got there a couple of years. Been gone probably a couple of years when they got there. So we missed completely there.
How long were y'all in Marianna?
I was there, let's see, like 13 months, just a little bit over a year. I was there. I think it was like 13 months. The war was just ended when I went there.
Mm-hmm.
They started, the food started getting better right after I got there because, all the rationing and stuff,
Right.
the war rationing. But I got there just as the war was ending, and I got out in, I think it was September of 46. So I was there like 13 months.
Mm. Now, I know that from some of the stories that I've read about my uncles, when they were in Marianna, they talked about how the boys would settle some conflicts with boxing. Do you ever remember them doing any boxing?
Oh, you settle that with your fist. You didn't have to put the gloves on. Oh, yeah, you're allowed that.
Okay.
If you had a dispute with another kid,
Yeah.
and y'all wanted to fight, all you had to do is tell the supervisor of the cottage, and they would have all the other kids go to the basketball court. And that's where you fought at.
Oh,
You
wow.
fought with your bare fist.
Oh, so there was no gloves, just bare fists.
No, you could street fight too. If you wanted to street fight, you had that understanding before the fight started. And if you knocked your opponent down, you could hit him again while he's down.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So,
They had boxing, but if you wanted to fight, you didn't put gloves on. You just fought with your bare fist.
oh, my goodness.
They had some good fighters there, too. C.W. Holloway was the heavyweight champion. He was from Orlando, Florida. And they entered some of the fighters there in the Northeast Florida Golden Gloves tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And he won. And he went all the way to New York City and fought in the national final. But he lost. He lost there.
So,
But he was a heavyweight champion of the campus.
right. So I asked you one time about Fred Breezy, and the reason I asked you was because we had found a newspaper article when I was doing research for our book, and I've actually well, my family knew Fred Breezy a lot, and so did John and Clarence. They grew up with him, but he was actually at Marianna. Him and another boy were sentenced to, I don't know, it was several months during the same time that John and Clarence went there. Fred and another young boy broke into a house and stole a motorcycle, and that's the reason why they were sent to Marianna. But you don't ever remember seeing him there, right?
No, he could have been there when I was, but he would have been in a different cottage, and I wouldn't know it. There was a lot of the kids in the other cottages that I knew for different reasons, you know.
Right.
Things they did and all, you know. But if he was there when I was, I didn't know it.
Well, I do know there is another news article where him and another boy escaped, and they got caught, but they were called the Rattlesnake, Rattlesnake something. I forgot why they called him the Rattlesnake. But anyway, I know that him and another boy escaped from there, but they got caught and got sent back. I didn't know if maybe you were around during that time and maybe remember. In fact, that's a good question. Do you remember anybody escaping while you were there?
Yeah, there was several escapes while I was there. And one of them was in number 2 cottage with the biggest and oldest boy. His name was Robert Goddard. And they never caught him. After I was released, I was walking down Main Street in Jacksonville, and I walked right by him. Oh, we just looked at each other and didn't say anything. All we did was look at each other, you know, and he went his way and I went mine. I never told anybody that I saw it, but as far as I know, they never caught him after he escaped.
Wow.
So, can you stop for a sec? So, just going back to when you asked him about Fred Breezy, he said that he wasn't there at the same time as Fred Breezy, or didn't know him.
No, he was there, but he didn't remember him. Undoubtedly, there were the I guess the housing or the barracks that they put the kids in. They put them in there based upon age. So maybe that's the reason why he must have been younger than most of them. Fred would have been older than John and Clarence, and that's one of the reasons why he said him and Clarence were in one of the buildings, I think building 3, and that John was in building 2, and could have been that's where Fred Breezy was at. Fred was pretty much he was a little older than John and Clarence, not much. But that might have been why he never saw him. But now he did though back up the fact that, and we have a newspaper article that we came across during our research where Fred Breezy and another boy did an escape from Marianna when they were there, and got caught and were sent back. So he definitely confirmed there were multiple escapes that had happened from Marianna. And in fact, I know we have one of the letters, I believe it was from Clarence, and he was giving the indication he was about to leave. He didn't like it there too much, and I don't think he ever broke out from Marianna, but if he had been there much longer, he probably would have.
Yeah, Mike, what were you looking up? You were typing away there. I could hear you.
Well, I was trying to find something about the rattlesnake reference that Ken made, and I couldn't find it. But going back to the boxing part, when we were doing the research for the book, we did find in the Florida archives, there were a lot of photographs from Marianna. And one of them was a picture of 2 of the boys boxing. They're out, like you said, they're out on kind of the blacktop area. And there's, you can see some of the staff there and the boys kind of in a big circle, kind of like a ring. And you see 2 of them going at each other boxing. So, that was a common form of I don't want to call it discipline, but just the way that they helped them resolve some of their conflicts by beating each other up. Yeah. And it was so commonplace that somebody took a photograph of it. That's how prevalent it was.
Interesting though. I mean, in that photograph, are they wearing boxing gloves?
I don't remember if they're wearing boxing gloves.
I believe they are.
Yeah, because it's interesting how the the gentleman you're talking to says that they would just go at it with no gloves, just bare hands and stuff like that. So maybe that was something that was kind of like, oh, they took it with the boxing glove to make it look like it more like an official sport. But the way he remembers it was like, oh yeah, they just threw out the blacktop and bare knuckles, and they would go at it, and that'd be it. But I'm sure it was a way back then of kind of relieving tension at the place and giving them an outlet for all their pent up energy being locked up, and also entertainment for themselves, for the
Right.
for the people who are running around, running the place.
Yeah, I mean, this was a juvenile detention area, so
Yeah.
it wasn't like they were in a main prison. So, kids are going to be kids, and you're going to have arguments and disagreements, and they undoubtedly encouraged them to box. But from what Charlie said, that if you didn't want to wear the boxing gloves, they would allow you to just go fist to fist.
Yeah, I found the picture in the book, and they are wearing boxing gloves.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
What year was that?
well, this was probably been in the 40s.
Yeah, I was going to say
40s and 50s. Yeah.
my grandpa was a boxer. Like he always boxed without gloves. And he told us that all the time. He was a boxer in New York City during the 40s and the late 30s. And he said that's what they did. They pretended they put the boxing gloves on. When no one was looking, they took them off, and they used to.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll continue on with it.
A couple of other kids escaped in 1945. Right after I got there, the ringleader was named Leonard Nelson.
Okay.
And I don't remember the other two kids that was with him. But anyway, in the middle of the night, he hotwired a car that belonged to the supervisor of their cottage, and drove all the way to Colorado. And they got somehow, I don't know if it was pulling a robbery or what, but I remember they had a run-in with the police, and Leonard Nelson shot it out with them. He had broke in somewhere and got a gun,
Right.
and he shot it out with them, and they gave him 20 years in the Colorado State Prison.
Ooh. Yeah, I don't think that was Fred was involved in that, because I remember him and the young boy who escaped with him. They went back either to Tampa or to Ruskin and got caught, because the article that I read was in the Ruskin or the Tampa newspaper during that time frame. But very interesting, because from everything that I had read about letters from John and Clarence that we have, we do have a letter when he was in Marianna, and it did sound like he was ready to leave. I don't know whether or not he actually left out of there, but I know he wanted to. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So I know you said you were in Rayford before. Did you ever meet Frank Morris? Because I know he was in Rayford one time.
No, he was there at a different time than I was.
Okay.
As far as I know, he was at a different time.
Did you ever meet Frank Morris at any time?
No, I never met him. But I knew Alan West. Alan West was a phony. Yeah, he liked to make gangster faces when he was talking, but when it come out, he wouldn't do shit.
Here, stop for a sec. So
he gets on the West.
I was going to say he knew. So where did he meet West?
Alcatraz.
Got it. All right. So he was there. Okay. Keep
But
going.
it's funny that he calls him a phony.
Yeah.
It's like he's got this reputation. Everyone who we talked to that knew him says nothing good about Alan West.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Whitey Bulger had nothing good to say about it.
No.
Yeah. Well, you look at his mugshot. He looks very rodent-like. He's very. He doesn't look like he looks like the type of guy that no one would really trust.
Well, and the thing is that, but John did trust him. He brought him in. He's part of the four to plan the escape, and now he was very important to them because he was next to Frank Morris in the cell. They had to work together, even though we've talked many times about how Morris thought nothing good about him and didn't trust him at all. And if the escape had been, the plans had been discovered, he was going to kill him, or at least try to. And but he was causing problems at Alcatraz. He was racist. He was antagonizing the black inmates, and almost caused the plan to fall apart when it became known what they were doing by the inmates. They could have ratted him out, and either Morris or John had sort of kind of calmed things down with Bumpy Johnson. They sort of formed an agreement, a truce. And they did rein Alan West in, obviously, because he didn't cause any further problems, and the escape did happen. But nobody liked him. Nobody trusted him. They nothing good about him. Now Charlie calls him a phony. You just can't believe anything he says. And yet John brought him in. And I think also it was maybe a partnership of convenience because he was the handyman. He roamed around the prison. He can get things to them.
That's what I'm thinking. He was a useful idiot to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
I think that's based upon everything I've read and what you guys have told, and some of the, and now we have a firsthand account, independent from anybody else, that he was a phony and stuff like. So maybe useful, keep your useful idiots closer as opposed to, because you can control them.
Yes.
And then when it seemed like his usefulness had sort of run out, again, they're probably just trying to keep a lid on him the whole time.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that Whitey says in the letters was that when he was caught talking to another inmate about their escape plan, Frank Morris got really angry because, what if he was a snitch? That would have been the end of it. You don't know who the snitches are. He said, whenever you go out, you stay with us. You don't go out by yourself anymore. He just could not be trusted to roam around the yard by himself, or if he was in the kitchen area, you stay with us because we can't trust you. And eventually in April, around that time, that's when it seemed like, we talked about how the plans had adjusted when Mickey Cohen comes back and they redo the raft because they have the information about the boat. It's at that point that Alan West is not part of the group, it seems. I mean, at least superficially he was, but he doesn't know what's really happening because after the escape, of course, he talks about everything but what really happened to the FBI. And he doesn't seem to know what was the real plan, how it had adjusted. So he was not on the inner circle anymore, it seems.
Yeah, I think Frank Morris, if he had made it out of that prison, and Frank Morris, he would have been a lost leader very quickly. They would have taken him out.
I've always believed that the way Whitey described it, John undoubtedly, for some reason, maybe from a previous stint in Florida state prisons with him, didn't want to see. I believe he didn't want to see him get hurt. I believe he believed that, Frank Morris was going to kill him, and I still believe to this day that he told him. And West just made it a very convenient thing not to get out that evening. And West wanted, I believe it was Whitey who said this. West just wanted the fanfare. He wanted to be able to say, "Hey, it was my plan. Here's how it happened." There's nobody there to dispute it, right? So John and Clarence and Frank Morris are gone. So they allowed him to have that limelight that he wanted. And he, shared the story, according to Whitey, that they told him to tell. And so that's, I just don't believe he had any intention in going.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Well, except the night he does have a change of heart, and he does try to dig out, but too late.
Yeah,
they're gone.
Okay.
Cool. So he goes off an hour.
Was the best fighter on Alcatraz, and he had a fight with another guy in the laundry, and he beat the hell out of the guy. And West grabbed a stick, jumped up on a table, that we laid clothes on, folding them and stuff. Mm-hmm. made some mean faces, and I don't remember what he said. But anyway, Joe Bent, he was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. If you look on the list, you'll find his name.
Right.
And he shot it out with a cop in the middle of an intersection. He was a bad egg. And he grabbed a stick. He went over to Alan West, grabbed the stick out of his hand, and cussed him out,
Mhm.
So get his punk ass down, he was acting like if anybody wanted to get in the fight on the other guy's, not Joe Coates, but the other guy's side, what he was going to do with that stick, and Joe Bent showed him to be what he was. He wasn't shit. He would act bad and talk bad and make gangster faces when he's talking, You know how the movie gangsters talk?
Right.
He had that kind of crowd, but Alan West was a phony.
So, what sent you to Alcatraz? What did you do in another prison that they sent you to Alcatraz?
Oh, I got in a bunch of trouble in Atlanta, and the last trouble I got in, me and a buddy of mine named John L. Sullivan, that was his real name, and there was a guy in there. He was about 6'6" tall, and he was a rat, and he went around at night, giving out water in the summertime. They'd take a bucket of ice water and go down the tier, and you could get you a cup full of ice water. And when he was in the Chattanooga jail, he was a trustee there, and he ratted out my rap partner in the Chattanooga jail. So that's why we beat the shit out of him. And there was another guy. I'm forgetting his name now, but anyway, we beat the hell out of him, and that was the last trouble I got in Atlanta. That I'd been in a bunch of trouble before that, but when I did that, they sent me to the rock.
So, when you were told you were going to Alcatraz, what was your reaction to that?
Oh, I didn't really care where I went. I had all them years ahead of me. I just didn't give a damn.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do.
Was Alcatraz pretty well known in the prison as being like, oh God, you don't want to go there?
Yeah. No, I didn't worry about it. I'd heard about it. A couple of guys that had come back from there were friends of mine, and they told me about things that went on there. And they told me about Alvin Carpus, and I made good friends with him because he was working in the library when I got there, and I got a job in the library, and we become good friends.
Now I know you wrote Whitey Bulger, and so did I. I became kind of good friends with him while he was in a prison in Lee County. But Whitey used to tell me in letters that how much he actually missed Alcatraz compared to other prisons. Of all the prisons that you were in, would you say Alcatraz was better than the other ones, or was it just another prison?
Better guys to deal with, Yeah, he told me the same thing. He said that the inmates they got nowadays, they would rat their own mother out. And he said they ain't got no rules they have to go by. He said they do whatever they want to do. Said they go in the kitchen, in the dining room. Said they'll yell way across the dining room to somebody else they want to talk to. And you have that kind of crap in prison back then, He said that they had tattoos all over their face. Said they'd grow their damn hair down like a woman. they'd grow long, scaggy beards, made them look like a piece of shit. And he told me that he'd much rather be back on the rock and do all that hard time that we did there than to put up with what you got to put up with nowadays.
Right. So when you were at Alcatraz, when you were there, did you ever think about escaping?
No, me and Joe Schultz and another buddy of mine from Atlanta, we talked about it. And when I first got there, we talked about it. And we started taking cold showers, try to get used to the cold water,
Right.
And you're in the water, in the bay. But that didn't last long. We changed our mind, we talked about it, yeah. But when I listed for helping Teddy Green in his escape, I wasn't involved in it. All I was doing was helping him. I sneak some of the materials up, for him. We had hacksaw blades.
Yeah.
We took Samco clothes, his pants, in the laundry. That's where the laundry's in the industry building, and so was the electric shop that Red Winhoven worked in. He worked in it by himself. He was on command. They locked the door, the gate. Had a gate and a fence, but they would put him in there and lock the gate. He couldn't get out, and nobody could get in. But he could pass stuff through the wicker wire to me, and that's how we got some of that material up there for the escape plot. We put it.
Here's that for a second. So what I'm gathering is he helped someone else try to escape.
What it sounds like, he didn't. Well, of course, he wasn't there during the '62 escape.
Yeah.
But there were many escapes that were attempted at Alcatraz, and he undoubtedly helped by bringing, according to him, hacksaw blades, which is kind of interesting because this is what Alan West finds in the corridor when he's cleaning up behind the cells. He finds hacksaw blades, which he didn't indicate that he's the one who placed them there or that these are the exact same blades. But it's just amazing how much stuff, even back when he was there, that prisoners had access to.
Well, it seemed like there was a lot of prior intelligence that John and Clarence had beforehand, because people were he said they were preparing by taking cold showers. So, obviously a lot of people were thinking about it, and there were other attempts. So there was some sort of base knowledge on what they thought they were going to need to do in order to get out. They had to prepare themselves, obviously, for the cold temperatures in the bay. And obviously, yeah, you're talking about the hacksaw blades. Maybe that was the remnants of a previous escape attempt that maybe failed or started, and and they retreated on it. So it's interesting that when John and Clarence do get there, there might have been people they could have, other people talked about it. Well, this is what you need to do, this, that, and that's, I find that really interesting that there was already kind of a list of things that you need to do in order to try to get off that island based upon previous attempts.
Well, and Charlie did say that, because Ken had asked him, what you thought of Alcatraz, and he talked about one inmate that was there that was sent back to Atlanta, and they would talk about Alcatraz, and he would kind of share some things. So perhaps John and Clarence might have known somebody who might have been at Alcatraz previously, at Atlanta or Leavenworth possibly, and just chatted about what it was like there. You got a lot of time on your hands, you share your experiences. So like you said, they might have had some foreknowledge of some aspects of the prison before they arrived.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too that we've always heard that they didn't allow cold showers. It was just hot. But I mean, he makes a reference that they had the ability to take a cold shower. So now I kind of wonder how much of some of that hot water only, was true. I mean, they might have had the option to get either or.
Yeah.
The other thing that I thought was interesting, and Whitey does talk about this in the letters that he sent to Ken about comparing Alcatraz and the more modern prisons when he was there, later in his life, and how he thought the prisoners, they were. He didn't think highly of the prisoners in his later life than he did at Alcatraz. It was kind of more of like more honorable kind of prisoners, kind of a thing that they had a standard of living. And I do know at Alcatraz, when you got there and your bunk was this little booklet of the rules and regulations of the prison that you had to follow. And one of the things they talked about very specifically was you had to have your hair cut a certain length. You had to keep it short. You had to shave. They gave you razors every week to be clean shaven, no beards, no mustaches, nothing like that, short hair. And your clothes had to be clean. They had the laundry there. You had to, you couldn't roll up your sleeves. That was not permitted. They had to be at your wrist area. You had to have button up your collar. There was a definite physical standard for the inmates. And then Charlie was saying, just as Whitey did, that, now you can wear your hair long, you can wear tattoos on your face, you can kind of roam around the prison freely. Whereas at Alcatraz, that was not a possibility. You were marched everywhere you went by the guards. You had to be herded in and herded out everywhere.
Mhm.
And then every time you went somewhere, there was a head count. And now it's like you roam free. It's, you come, you go, it's no big deal. And it's like the experience is much less now than it was back then at Alcatraz. It was almost militaristic in a way. And you just sort of have that esprit de corps. We're all doing these things together, and sort of unconsciously, it's sort of like, there's more of a unity about the prison because you all had to act the same way. Now it's just a free for all. You can do whatever you want kind of a thing. I mean, obviously to a certain extent, but it's much more relaxed now than it was back then. And both Whitey and Charlie say that's not good. That's not a good prison environment.
Interesting.
That
That
is
is interesting that a prisoner would say that.
right. Exactly. All right. I have to go to a meeting. Sorry, I have to leave. But Ken, I'll text you in a little bit about your mom and setting up that interview
Okay.
with her so we can organize that. We got to get that in the can ASAP.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Do you want to play a little bit more?
Yeah. Let's play a little bit more.
Those pants, and then Simcoe, he worked in the clothes room, so he was on the alert for it. He would take the stuff out of his pants and then sneak it upstairs. He changed the certain days of the week. We changed our bedding and the towels, face towels.
Right.
He would take that stuff up certain days of the week and put it in each cell. And that's how he got the escape equipment, putting his clothes up and into Teddy Green's cell. So that's how we did that part.
It sounded out like there were a lot of people that were planning an escapes over the years.
Yeah, I imagine there was a lot of guys planning it, but they didn't get very far.
So
Larry, I can't remember Larry's last name now, but anyway, him and Clyde Johnson.
mm-hmm.
If you look up Clyde Johnson on your smartphone, look up his background.
Mm-hmm.
He's a bad ass. He robbed a bunch of banks, had feet out for the police, escaped from the Miami skyscraper jail, and he was a bad ass on the FBI's 10 most wanted list for him and Larry. I used to sell next to Larry, and I got to know him good. But they worked on the trash detail, a pickup truck.
Mm-hmm.
The guard was with them, and they would drive all over the island, picking up trash, taking it to the incinerator. Well, they tied that guard up one day, and they went down, got down to the water, and Clyde said Larry had a couple of boulders that he strapped to his feet real good, to help him swim in the water. And he said, I was standing there watching. He went in the water first. As soon as he started to swim and push with his feet, that all of a sudden the undertow pulled him straight down under the water.
Oh my goodness.
And he said, I stood there and watched and said he never resurfaced. He said, so I didn't go in the water. He surrendered. He said, hell with that. He wasn't ready to drown.
Right.
But he said that he never resurfaced. And it was about a week before they found his body.
Oh.
And the crabs had chewed on him and ate on him.
Mm.
Stop a second.
That water was
I guess he's talking about an escape attempt that didn't go well.
Yeah, there were quite a few. I'm sure we could probably do some research on those names, and there could have been some too that he was telling about that never took off. They were just planning it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there were a lot of people, having plans, and they'd get to a certain point and realize, okay, this is not going to work, and so. But yeah, there were a lot of individuals who died trying to escape out.
Well, and the story he tells is very similar to what Robert Scheiblein shared with us a few weeks ago about two of the inmates that were trying to swim for it, and at a certain point they got pulled down in the water, and he said they never came back up again. And this story is eerily similar, where he got pulled down, never came back, and they found him a week later. They recovered the body.
Did I hear right that he put some like boards on his feet for try to make them like flippers or something?
Yeah, probably like fins. I think he undoubtedly tied them, which is pretty creative to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would definitely give you some propulsion. So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's nuts. What else does he start talking about, Ken? Anything else kind of relevant to answer, or just kind of like his more reminiscing?
It's really kind of more reminiscing. I did ask him about clifffish. Like I said, we're only 24 minutes into a 45-minute. I mean, I can highlight some of the things that he did talk about clifffish. He did know Cliff. He did talk about how that clifffish at one time had to, I guess, shake down a cell of an individual who played a trumpet while they were out working. And undoubtedly, the guy who played the trumpet didn't appreciate what Cliff had done. He must have messed his cell up or something. But anyway, he said that the inmate came back and grabbed the trumpet and began to beat the heck out of Cliff Fish. And I said, oh, my gosh, hopefully it didn't do too much damage to him. He said no. He just pounded over his head a couple of times, and he wound up, the prisoner wound up in the hole, he said, for oh, my gosh, for a long time for attacking Cliff. He didn't know Charles Herman. I asked him about that. He said he wasn't that familiar with the guards. He pretty much kind of stayed away from them. His reminiscing with Whitey Bulger was, I think, kind of special to him because they both knew
Carnes. Was it Carnes?
Or Carnes, Joe Carnes. Who was a Native American who was in Alcatraz many, many years. And he told the story about how when Joe Carnes passed away, he was buried in I believe it was Leavenworth grave site for prisoners. And when Whitey found out about it, he contacted I believe it was the Indian reservation in Oklahoma, and then worked with the federal prison, believe it or not, spent $20,000 to have him exhumed and moved to the Indian reservation where he was buried. So, Whitey, and this Charlie said that Whitey was one of those kind of guys that you didn't mess with. But if you were loyal to him and a friend, he was the best friend you would ever want to have. But if you ever crossed him, he was the worst enemy that you ever had. So he was pretty adamant about that. And then the last thing I asked him was, I know that he wasn't there in the 1962 escape, but I wanted his impression about, did he believe that they made it? And if not, why didn't he believe it? And he said that of all the people, that he really kind of hoped that they had made it. He said he didn't know one way or the other. He really didn't have an opinion. It was always his hope that they did make it. And he said Whitey was very adamant with him that he thought that they had made it. So, which is pretty much where he was sharing with me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very interesting talking to him, someone that had been at Alcatraz, and he's the last living inmate. So,
Well, no, there's one other, Bill Baker.
Oh, there's one other. Oh, that's
One
right.
other.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
How these gentlemen can, had such a hard life and still, it's got to be good genes.
Yes.
It's got to be.
I mean, he's 93 years old, and you hear him. He
sounds great.
He's still pretty good. So that really kind of leans in that could John or Clarence, one of them, still be alive? I believe maybe John. I'm hoping one day, that we find it. This photograph that we're having looked at from Brazil, that would indicate that he's not alive. But as long as we could find him, I would be very very happy. And we should be getting an answer today on the facial recognition look at this photograph.
Fantastic. Well,
so maybe we'll have something next week.
Yeah,
very special.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, we got a lot of things going on in the next couple weeks in relation to this that we'll share when we have answers. But there's a lot of movement happening behind the scenes here, working with experts and stuff like that to help us solve this crazy mystery. But this photograph has been really interesting. In addition to hearing, Charlie talk and stuff like that, just kind of reaffirms kind of the setting and the attitude and the behaviors of people. And the fact that he was there in reform school with your uncles, and that he has a Whitey Bulger connection, after the fact, and just, and the fact that he's still alive after all this time, and just all those connections is just kind of, I don't know. It's almost like it's affirmation that we're going to find something, because, we still have people who can talk about this stuff, can talk about the experiences, can give us the validity of the fact that Alan West was a phony, and, because he knew him personally. It's just like, you don't have to go by written transcripts or articles. You said, yeah, I knew Alan, but yeah, he was in the cell. Yeah, he was a phony. He was like this, he was this, that, and the other thing. So it's really interesting to get firsthand knowledge of these characters that, and these people that we've been talking about, and you guys have been living with and wading through for years now. And I mean, it's got to be interesting for you guys too, because you have so much work into this, and now you drag Cindy and I into this, and we have so much. We like friggin' I have dreams sometimes about Alcatraz. It's weird.
Welcome to the rabbit hole.
Exactly. Well, one of the many rabbit holes that Cindy and I end up going down, but it's fascinating. And then, so yeah, we'll hear hopefully for next week's podcast, we'll be able to hopefully have at least some information about that photograph. You've been talking to some of the people that forwarded to that photograph to you, so we're gonna, we'll share that information as well, which is pretty compelling,
Yes.
And so stay tuned, people. Till next week, we'll have more information. But thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.